Let's take a break from blending modes just for a second. We'll call this a commercial break. Open up Opacity Fill right here. It's in your exercise file. One of the things that I think is really cool is the difference between the word opacity and fill as they exist over here in our layers panel. Now, if we go to the word opacity, that's a word in a layer by itself, and we come over here and we select opacity, we can drag whatever you want to do here to change that. I think we know what's going to happen. The image will begin losing its opacity, and it gets to the point where it would be gone completely. Let's leave that at about, say, 45%. Now, let's go down to the word fill. Now, fill's got an opacity too. That's just a word in a layer, but it also has, just like the other one, a fill option. Now, let's take that down to 45%. Do you see any difference? I hope not, because there isn't any difference. Fill serves a purpose, but only when something happens to the layer that you're working in. So let's do this. Let's take those both back up to 100%. Back to start. Let's go back to fill. When you go to opacity, did you ever notice that you have a 0 opacity? And what I used to wonder about that is, why would I have a 0 opacity? I don't use this for, say, text wrapping like I do in InDesign, invisible objects. It didn't seem to make sense to me. But opacity to 0 didn't start in Photoshop until the fill option came out. Before that, you had an opacity that went down to 1, which was probably just about as bad as 0, but it didn't get to 0 till we got to fill. Now let me show you this quickly. In the fill layer, I have added something, a bevel and emboss. See it? There it is. Not really that much, but there's a little bit of a bevel on that word fill. This changes everything about opacity versus fill. If I go to the word opacity now and pull it down, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to take it down to 0. Let's take it back to 100. But watch what happens now when I do a fill. It will do the same thing. It's going to remove the color, but it leaves the effect. So in a sense, what I've got here now is something that almost looks like a bevel coming out of that background, when in reality, all I really have is a light and shadowed area on an invisible word. Fill works with this stuff right here. Anything you do and then you turn fill off, the effect stays, the fill goes away, and you can do some really cool things. Let me show you one more thing here. Here's Kripalu Fog. So what I've got here are the words Kripalu Fog, and I use what's called a wave filter on them to make them look a little bit more wispy, I suppose. I also did something else. I added some effects to this thing. I added an outer glow and an inner glow. Watch what happens when I come up here, and let's select it and turn off the fill. Kind of have the glowing words, I guess, Kripalu Fog in there. If we pick up our Move tool, you can see right through them. And you've created kind of a different look to the image with some words using the fill option and effects down here. That's the difference between opacity and fill. On to the next.